Canon versus Sony versus Nikon versus Fuji versus Panasonic versus Leica versus Hasselblad. We're doing that age-old debate of which camera brand is the best and where we think they're headed.
And you know what? We're not going to hold any punches. I know it's going to make the sensitive fanboys upset when we say your favorite camera brand isn't perfect, but we're going to tell it like it is. So if you can handle that, stay tuned. But first, we want to tell you about our sponsor, Squarespace.
Whether you want your own website, store, portfolio, you can make it happen with Squarespace. It's so super easy. If you can drag and drop and you have about 20 minutes, you can make your own website and it will look beautiful, professional, and you can get it for free for 14 days. Go to squarespace.com/Chelsea, use the coupon code Chelsea, and you'll get 10% off. Thanks, Squarespace. All right, let's hop right into it.
First, I want to say we have never accepted a sponsorship from a camera or lens manufacturer because in the comments there's going to be a bunch of people saying, oh, they're just shills for this company. But to give you some idea, these are the cameras that we actually shoot. Like when we go out for fun, we grab a Leica or a Fuji. And when we go out for work or for wildlife, we both shoot Sony cameras, Sony A1s.
Yeah.
And here in the studio, we're filming this with Canon RPs, though I also use a Canon R6 for my news pieces. And then when we're shooting run and gun, we film with a Sony A7S III. We have two of them.
All this to say, we're not brand loyalists, so if a company comes out with something better, we try it. Not because you need to always switch, but because this is our job and we review cameras, so we try everything.
Let's start with OM System, which is the camera division that Olympus sold off when they exited the camera industry.
Oh, I always liked Olympus. Remember, those were our go-to travel cameras. They're so light and fun and attractive.
And like this amazing sensor stabilization. But they used to be like the mirrorless tech leader. And then Fuji came along and they had bigger sensors. And then Canon and Nikon entered the full-frame mirrorless game and they brought all their resources and they just couldn't really keep up. But they are still around. But if you look at their front page, they have this quote right at the top. They say, "We don't run in the race, never have and never intend to."
So I think, to me, there's a lot of ways to interpret that, but to me, I think they're saying, we're not going to have the biggest specs. You know, they don't have the highest frame rate. They don't have a camera over 20 megapixels. They're not doing the spec war. I think what they're saying is that, like, if you like our cameras, you like our cameras.
Yeah, they call themselves the dark horse, but this video is all about the race. Yeah. So sorry, guys.
Yeah, I still do think, though, that the OM enthusiasts just like it because they like it.
They're still around, and they are focusing on birds, wildlife, macro, and landscapes.
That is not where I would put my focus if I were them.
No.
But I don't own a camera company, so what do I know? I would go with street photography. That's always what I enjoyed with them.
Right. I mean, their highest megapixel camera is still just 20 megapixels.
Yeah.
And we like to be 45 megapixels or more for things like wildlife, since you so frequently have to crop. Same for landscapes. We like high megapixel cameras. And
not just we, just like photographers.
Right. Their releases have really slowed down. And even like their last release of the OM5 was pretty much almost 100% just a recycled older camera rebranded with OM branding.
Yeah.
And the new tech has pretty much dwindled down. It's not encouraging. And when I look at Google Trends to see what cameras people are searching for, they do not register. I can't even give you numbers because people are not looking for the cameras. I
think that their issue is that they're so hung up on not competing in the race. Like, that's a horrible view to take, guys. Like, there are people that will buy cameras just because they look cool. Just lean into that.
Yeah, and they do have fun, cool,
they have cool, fun cameras.
You know, people don't so much care about megapixels for stuff that goes on social media, which is what 90% of people are buying cameras for. Like, they actually have equipment that could work, but their marketing, I think, is going in the wrong direction. But they are starting to do a lot of influencer marketing, specifically with, like, our peers. They even reached out to us, and we turned them down. But I am seeing some of our peers pick it up, and more power to them. I also want to say that they are still, for like 6 years now, focusing their marketing on crop factor confusion. They are playing off of that to sort of lead people to believe their camera can do things that it can. So if you look at the website, they compare their 300 millimeter f4 micro four thirds lens against a full frame 600 millimeter f4. which would lead people to believe that they produced equivalent results. But they don't in any way produce equivalent results.
I think it's really difficult to explain.
It is so difficult to explain that people can't understand it, and they just go with the simple answer, which is it's smaller and lighter. But really, it's the same size as full-frame gear that produces similar results. Now let's talk about Panasonic Lumix, which continues to be like one of my personal favorite camera companies. Like, I really like the people there. They've always been frank, and they've also carved out a niche for themselves in video that they just identified with and have stuck with.
Yeah, I think that they have a good niche. I like their marketing. I like that they have their own thing that they're doing and they're sticking to it, and they serve their market really well. So.
And you know what? When we reviewed the Panasonic S5, which is their like $2,000 camera, we compared it against the Sony a7 III, which is wildly popular. And we liked the Panasonic better. And we said that loudly, but nobody seems to have listened, because if you look at people searching for their cameras on Google Trends, it is almost non-existent.
Yeah.
Like, compared to the Canon R6, about 32 times more people search for the Canon R6 than the Panasonic S5.
Well, it's really difficult because I think people judge a brand based on its flagship camera. So people hear that like the Sony Alpha 1 is the best or something, and then they just buy a less expensive Sony, but maybe that's not the right camera. Maybe the S5 II would be better for them.
I also think staying constantly in the news really helps Canon, Nikon, Sony. Like, even if people aren't buying the cameras, the fact that they're hearing about the latest high-end Nikon Z8 all the time, they're seeing all these new lenses, that makes them think of that brand when they go to choose, and I think that might be working against Panasonic. They don't have a steady stream of releases.
That actually makes sense, and that would explain why a lot of companies put out a new camera, and I'm like, what is new about this? But just having new releases probably does just keep them in the news cycle and make them seem more relevant.
For a long time, people, including us, have complained about Panasonic's video autofocus.
Yeah.
Because they're video-centric, but their autofocus couldn't keep up with Sony and Canon, and they finally launched phase detect autofocus with the Panasonic S5 II, but we still didn't find it to be good enough. Just enabling PDAF did not solve all the problems. It just meant they had first-generation phase detect autofocus, and it's still a couple of years behind.
I still find that promising, though, because they're taking steps in a direction to improve their gear.
Yeah.
They're not saying, we're not running in the race. They're just like, we're getting there, and they always deliver what they say they're delivering. I've never found them to way overpromise or anything.
Yes, they do not overpromise like so many of the other companies do, and that's one reason I really like them.
I like them.
Let's talk about Fujifilm. And people don't think about this, but Fujifilm owns the consumer camera market by a massive percentage, because they created the Instax camera.
Yeah.
Because they have the wildly popular X100V that
the whole X100 series,
can get.
Really.
And when I look at Google Trends, people looking for Instax, which are like Polaroid instant cameras, and the X100V far outnumber people looking for any interchangeable lens cameras, including like the Canons. So they're less expensive, they're consumer friendly, but they're also things that young people like to use. Because young people find these interchangeable lens cameras to be completely baffling and archaic.
If you go on a certain website that sells everything from A to Z, their most popular photography products are like Fuji's Instax camera and then their film. So they just have products that just sell.
Even our own daughter, the only camera she used like her whole teenage life was an Instax camera, and she promptly like ripped through every roll of film that I bought and hung them up and absolutely loved it, but won't touch any of our other cameras.
That's actually not true. She did use our other cameras, but then she didn't want to plug them into a computer. And that was where she was like, whoa.
Yeah, when it came to uploading the pictures, she just set it down and was like, I'll never see those pictures again.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the X mount and the GFX mount, because that's what our audience is more interested in than the true consumer cameras.
Yeah.
I just talked about how nobody was searching for the S5. About half the number of people are searching for the XH2 as the S5. It's even less popular than the Panasonic. And the X-T5 does a little bit better, but none of these cameras really rank. And then if you talk about GFX, there's even less interest there. And Fuji has kind of stopped with the Kaizen updates that built so much brand loyalty. That was them releasing firmware updates that added new features to their existing cameras. We don't see that anymore. they have stopped updating the key lenses, like the most important lenses, like the 16 to 55.
Yeah, it's like 8.5 years old now.
Yeah, it was released in 2015, and it shows. If you compare it against the equivalent lens in like the full frame Sony, Canon, Nikon system, it absolutely does not compare.
Yeah, but they have this situation where these consumer cameras, like the Instax and then the whole X100 series, like they are selling so well they can actually reallocate employees to those divisions where they're doing well.
Yeah.
Their company seems healthy and they're making money and they're selling cameras.
And I applaud it because they create affordable cameras, but they also make them fun, fashionable, and cool. And nobody else seemed to have figured out that photography can be fun, fashionable, and cool.
Yeah, I love my X100V. I still have that camera. I've had multiple people try to buy it off of me, but I can't part with it. It is not my sharpest camera. It doesn't have the best lens.
No.
But it's so much fun. I just love using it. So Fuji has that figured out.
Speaking of fun, fashionable, and cool, if you take that and then you add
$5,000.
You're looking at Leica and Hasselblad.
Yeah.
Both companies which I really like. They have a ton of history and they know how to make luxury cameras. And I wish all the companies would start to look at luxury cameras, because cameras are for many people a luxury. They're not just tools, but it's something that you can love. It can be a hobby. They do things in a completely different way that is superior in some ways. Like the user interface on the Hasselblad is stunning. And even as a professional, I never found it wanting. But I could find everything I needed quickly and easily without having to read like literally a 1,000-page manual that you'll get on a Canon or Sony.
Yeah. I think that they lean into the legacy too, which is what a lot of people are buying for. So my other camera that is my fun camera is my Leica Q2. And the Q3 just came out, so it's a bit dated, but that doesn't matter to me because I'm not in it for high-tech features. I love the build quality, I love the feel, I love the heritage, I like the way the pictures look, I like the way the lens looks, even though it's not totally perfect. So they have this market cornered on having this luxury experience where people are connecting to the brand. And I think that's extremely smart. I think Fuji could have that too. And in fact, I think Olympus or OM, whatever, could have it as well if they would just lean into that a little bit more. People like what they like. Why not give them a little nicer experience to go with it?
I think these companies are totally healthy.
Yeah.
Leica will definitely be making cameras in 20 or probably 50 years, and they will probably look almost exactly like their current cameras do.
They're like the Porsche of cameras.
Yeah, like the M mount, Leica M is definitely the 911, right?
Yeah.
It has not changed, it's not going to change.
Yeah.
I do worry or wonder about Hasselblad because they're mostly owned by DJI, and I don't know what that means because I don't know how
much they value that brand. Yeah. I don't know. I think that it'll stay around because I think that the Hasselblad name also has a lot of history. I mean, it's the first camera to go to the moon. You know, everyone knows it as just a well-made heritage company, and now they're sticking that branding on their drones to make their cameras look better. So they'll probably want to keep that legacy alive for a while.
Yeah, and Hasselblad's one of the only companies that is making cameras where I pick them up for the sake of a review, and I'm like, oh, I personally want this.
I know you do.
It's hard to justify because they are expensive.
Why? How much is the one you want?
With the lens, it'd probably be like 10K. Like that's a lot for a camera.
Who's going to do it if not you, though?
Well, maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe nobody is doing it. Maybe photographers are just too practical.
All right, coming up after the break, we're going to talk about the big three, Nikon, Sony, Canon, and talk about what their brand has going on, what we think about it, and where they're headed. We have to try to place them, too. Who we think is number one, who we think is number two.
Oh, man, that's tense.
I know, it's tense.
But first I want to thank our sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is where you should send your customers to, anybody interested in your work, not your social media. Here's why. You can invest a lot in building a Facebook, Instagram, a Twitter presence, and then those companies can just change the rules, change the algorithm, and now you're paying for it if you want to get any kind of traction.
Yeah.
You can literally go to restaurants' Facebook and see advertisements for their competitors. You need to control your presence by having your own website, and that all starts at squarespace.com/Chelsea. Choose your colors, your fonts, your branding, And best of all, no advertisements on it, just you. So use your social media to direct people to your own website. We have multiple websites, and you probably should too, for different styles of photography, different endeavors that you have. Either way, squarespace.com/Chelsea starts out your free trial. If you love it, the coupon code Chelsea gets you 10% off, but there's no credit card required to try it out. So thanks for sponsoring us, Squarespace.
All right, let's get into this top 3. We're going to start with Nikon. We're saying that's number 3. I think that's debatable.
Would you say it's better than Sony or Canon, or are you pushing it further back?
I think Fuji might have better sales than Nikon, but I guess I'll have to look into that.
It's tough to quantify this because it depends how you cut up the market. Fuji is definitely outselling if you include their like consumer fixed lens camera divisions, and even the interchangeable lens cameras, it can be back and forth. But I think just this year, Nikon has seen some really strong sales of the Z8, and the Z9 is even continuing to sell pretty well. So I don't know, but you're right, it's close, and Nikon is definitely not in the competition for first or second place. They're definitely a third place runner-up. But in some ways that's an advantage, because Nikon is trying harder. They are offering more features for less money. They're keeping their prices down, at least on their bodies, and giving you everything they can think of.
Well, the Z8 is fantastic. And I was so relieved when that camera came out because things were a little bit touch and go. A few years ago, Nikon was showing huge losses in their financial reports, and then they had a massive round of layoffs. And not to mention, it was also just a very unstable time in the world. So there was this trifecta of concerning things going on for Nikon.
Recently, we reviewed the Z8 and we really liked it, but I still see comments every day that are like, oh, I thought you said Nikon was going bankrupt. But we never said anything like that. We did investigate the rumors, but we concluded there was just too much of a legacy out there. So many people owned Nikon equipment that in one form or another, Nikon would definitely persist.
Yeah, and thankfully they did. They are persisting. They came out with the Z8, and I think it's their best camera ever. So that was extremely exciting. But they still don't have the market share that Canon and Sony do.
But they are selling. People are buying them, and at least from their financial reports, they seem to be making a profit now. All the corrective actions that they took seem to have made a difference. We reviewed the Z8 and the Z9 firmware 4, and we feel like they're close to catching up to Canon and Sony. Like, they're better in some ways, they're worse in other ways.
Yeah.
But they're there. They're like in the race again, which is good.
I would recommend the Z8 and the Z9 now. When the Z9 came out, I would not have. I was not a fan, but they needed those firmware updates to get it up to par with the Sony and the Canons.
Right. But they seem to put all their energy into their top-end cameras. Like, we're talking $4,000, $5,500, and they haven't put any energy into their lower-end cameras. And when I shoot with the lower-end cameras, they leave me wanting. They make me feel like I would not recommend this camera.
I don't recommend those, no.
And in fact, we own a Z30 that I bought just for the sake of reviewing it, and I tried it out, and I decided not to review it.
You're getting
I do this
soft.
sometimes.
You're getting a little soft.
Because I don't like to make bad. People think I love like trashing cameras. Sometimes I feel like I have to, because I have this thing where I don't want consumers to spend their money and feel upset about it. That would keep me up at night if I caused somebody to save up their money and spend it unwisely. So
your Z30's on the shelf.
You're right. I should have reviewed. I should have made a bad review of it because it's not a good vlogging camera.
Why not? What's going to happen?
You're going to be out of focus, and you're going to be mad at it.
No, I mean, what's going to happen if you make the bad review? Everyone's going to be mad at you.
Super mad at me.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm not completely dead inside. I guess I'm not completely thick-skinned.
Well, you should be. We're making it now. All right, what else? Oh, just that the bottom part of their line is not as good. The Z8 and the Z9 are great. Everything else still has to catch up. So they have an inconsistent lineup. The best of their best tech, they're killing it. Let's hope it trickles down.
Yeah, for years, people were leaving Nikon for the Sony mirrorless system. And then they were leaving Nikon for the Canon mirrorless system when that launched and took off. I don't think Nikon is losing any loyalists anymore.
No.
I think people have an upgrade path within Nikon that they can be satisfied with. But my question is, can they convert are there going to be any people selling their Sony or Canon gear to go to Nikon? And that, I feel like that's not a compelling offer.
I mean, that's just in the marketing now, like we've talked about with the other brands. Are they going to pump a bunch of money into marketing? Because they just need to get influencers, getting people to buy their cameras.
So let's talk about the big two now. Used to be Canon and Nikon, now it's Canon and Sony. And I don't even know, like, I'm like this, because they both have strengths.
Yeah, I don't know who to put at number one. And you're right, their strengths are that, I think that Sony's number one, if you just look at their flagship cameras and compare, I think that the Alpha one is the best camera on the market right now.
Yeah, that's what we both shoot for that stuff.
But I think that Canon has better options in their less expensive cameras. So like the R7 is an excellent camera, and I don't think Sony has a competitor for that.
Well, we just reviewed the A6700. It was brand new, but we still came across like steering people towards the Canon, even though it was older. It beat the 6700 in so many different ways.
But then Canon is locking people out of buying third-party lenses, so then that brings me back to Sony.
It's such a complex
What I'm trying to say
decision.
is, like, we're up and down with this one, so let's just get into Sony and talk about what they have going on.
Okay, they're smart. They have 3 separate lineups because they recognize that there are different styles of photographers. Whereas Canon and Nikon, they still seem to be like stills photographers, and also you take some video.
Yeah.
Sony has the ZV lineup, which is like vloggers and social media centric, video centric, can also take stills. And then they have the FX lineup, which is for proper cinema filmmakers. They have like built-in rigs and stuff. Nikon has nothing like that. And then of course the Alpha series, which is the most popular series, their oldest series, which is stills first, video second. And the lenses are kind of structured the same way. Like they have a lot of stills first lenses, but a lot of their lenses are also excellent hybrid lenses. Like they do things like minimize focus breathing during video. They have a lot of power zoom lenses.
Yeah, their power zoom lenses are nice for video because then you're not shaking your camera to zoom in. They're really thinking about the user experience.
Yep, and you know, clickless apertures, things like the things that you would typically have to buy a cinema lens for. They're bringing those features into the entry-level market, and I think they address like the vlogger market better than anybody else does.
But then they also are addressing people who are shooting with APS-C cameras, and they're making new, sharp, beautiful APS-C glass specifically for them, which is what Fuji people are all about. But like we were saying, some of their lenses are like almost 9 years old now. Yeah. And Sony is keeping up on developing that.
Yeah, and they're good quality. They're sharp, they're capable, they're small, they're light. And if you look at the APS-C lineup from Canon and Nikon, they're non-existent. They're essentially just a couple of kit lenses. So at the lower end of the market with APS-C, if you care about the lens, like you have to be in Sony for the most part. But Canon has so many great APS-C bodies. I wish we could blend the two. Part of it is Sony also has a completely open mount. So anybody can make third-party lenses for it. And as a result, we see a ton of third-party options. Sigma and Tamra make amazing lenses with good autofocus now at lower price points. So you just have so many different choices.
Yeah, but I also think that Sony's infrastructure is more modern, and what I mean by that is that they're keeping up on software development. They have their smartphone, which we have predicted in a previous video they're going to be bringing that technology into their cameras and like...
Yeah, the Xperia smartphones, which don't have any market share, but have an amazing platform for photography.
Yeah, and then they have, their app is better than the other ones. Like, you can download your images a lot faster, it's more reliable.
Yeah, it's like 3 times faster than Nikon and like 10 times faster than Canon in our most recent tests.
And then they also have drones in their company lineup, which right now they're not consumer level drones, are like really professional. You have to actually strap a full camera to the drone, but it works well. It's not like some side project that's failing. Like, they're probably using these in their films. They are using these in their films, Sony Pictures.
But I think they're going to take that tech and build an integrated drone with like a alpha body built right into it, and it'll be smaller, lighter, cheaper. But they're developing the tech. They have a strategy. Canon, Nikon, Olympus, Fuji, Panasonic, no drones.
I see just a very big long-term plan for them, and I think that's promising for them.
Yeah, I feel like Sony, more than any other company, is completely committed to the camera industry. Like Canon and Nikon, they both kind of distanced themselves in 2014 when the camera industry started to downturn. They're like, wait, we make medical equipment. We focus on office supplies. But Sony, they do a lot of things, but they really like doubled down. They're like,
Yeah.
we're in this for the long haul. We want to own every part of this content creation vertical. They believed in the space, and it kind of shows with their investment.
So the Sony Alpha 1, which is their flagship camera, is 2.5 years old, which is old for in camera world, and it's still $6,500.
Yeah, the price has not come down.
And I still shoot with it, so no switching video for me. That's the one downside. I think it's still the best.
I think it's the best camera ever made, period.
So I don't know.
Even though a bunch of camera releases have happened since then.
Yeah.
The A1 still wins, and so I think Sony is still the tech leader. But they have some weaknesses in their lineup.
I will say, though, let me just add to that the A1 wins for us because we are especially interested in wildlife. But like the R5 is really good, and people shooting portraits will not notice a difference.
That's true. Like wildlife is particularly demanding.
And I have to say this because I don't want you out there being like, it's the best. If I buy it, my picture is going to be better. Like if you're doing landscape, you don't need the best autofocusing system with animal IF tracking. Like,
no.
Don't worry about that.
But they have some weaknesses in their lineup. Like we're filming this now on full frame Canon RPs, and I bought these 3 cameras for $900 each. Sony has no cheap full frame camera. Canon just launched the Canon R8, which is amazing and well rounded, and $1,500. Like that's at the price of an APS-C camera, but it's full frame and does everything well. And Canon just launched the R100, which is like the $500 camera that everybody wants. And it's not a powerful camera, but it is capable, it's good enough, it'll just focus on whatever you point it at and take a decent picture. And Sony has nothing to match that.
Yeah, hopefully they will. I think that market needs to be served. Okay, now let's talk about Canon.
Yeah, for the longest time they've been the #1. I think they still might be the #1 camera seller, like literally since the 80s. They are iconic. And they're hanging in there. Like they won our camera of the year for 2022. The Canon R10, not because it was the most powerful, but because it was so powerful at a given price point. Like it could do wildlife at an incredibly low price point, and we were so impressed.
Yeah.
And I think the R8 is a real strong contender for the 2023.
Really? What about the Z8?
I mean, it is a come from behind story, but I don't know.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait till our end of the year awards to see which camera gets it. But Canon has strong contenders again.
Yeah, in 2020 they launched the R5 and blew everybody away with the autofocus, and then they just took that tech and trickled it down. That's what Nikon has not done.
And I'll say even Sony has not done enough of that.
Yeah.
They do a lot of it, but not enough. So that's something nice. I think that Canon has the most consistent lineup where they're putting good tech just in all of their cameras from the most expensive to the least expensive.
Yeah. With a focus on usability.
Yeah.
Like you can just leave it in auto, pick it up, and it will just find the subject and focus on it. Or record like perfect video where your face is always in focus.
But it's not fun.
Well, no.
It's not it's
Sony's
not fun.
not fun either, though. They're just all the like minivans of cameras. Like they all look the same. They're all just black.
I think I don't want to put down minivans. They do what they're supposed to do. This is not a slam, but
these do what they're supposed to do.
They're utility.
Yeah.
I would say Sony's more like an SUV. Like you don't really want the minivan, but you still need the utility with a few little cool things. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
What do you think is the sexiest Canon camera? If you're doing a photo shoot and your camera's going to be there, which one do you pick up?
The AE one.
Yeah.
From 1974 or whatever.
I don't know why they can't make cool cameras.
They should just remake that camera and just put the guts of like the R10 in an AE1. You got me.
So we're talking about how amazing Canon's camera bodies are at their price points, but here's their overall strategy for making money with their RF mount. They clearly underprice their bodies.
Yeah.
So that when we review them against the similarly priced competitors, they've blown away, which has been what's happening. But then they block
third-party lenses so that you have to buy their expensive glass and can't save money by buying third-party lenses.
Yeah.
And then they make money.
Right.
It's like when you shop for your plane seats by looking for the least expensive plane ticket, and then you get there and you have to pay for your carry-on luggage, or there's some like tacked on fees and stuff.
But everybody just shops for a camera body, and then they leap into the system and then they're just forced to buy lenses.
Yeah.
But if you were to add up the price of your camera body and 4 lenses, I think most people would find the Sony system would serve them better, but people aren't that long-sighted. They're very short-sighted, and so I think these Canons will probably sell like hotcakes.
Yeah, we do recommend that if you're buying into a system, consider the price of everything, like your lens, your accessories, everything. Did Canon also have a camera that was blocking third-party flashes?
Yeah, the R8 did that. You would have to use like a separate adapter, but then in the lower-end cameras, they open it up again.
That's weird. What do you guys think? Which camera brand are you rooting for? Which are your favorites? Are we totally off base? Have we enraged you? Are you gone already?
They won't be able to respond if they are.
They can't respond. I just want to say that after all of this, I just don't think your camera can even matter at all if you have not learned like the fundamentals of photography. If you don't know about composition and leading lines and light and when to use exposure compensation, what are you even spending all that money for? And I know exactly how people can do that. We have a book called Stunning Digital Photography, and you don't have to search around online for little tidbits here and there. We like take you through the whole process of learning how to use your camera and take pictures.
But it's not just a book, it has videos throughout it. So you could choose to just watch the videos. But for the best results, you'll read a paragraph or a page or two and then watch the associated video. And that's the best way to learn.
Yeah, so check that out. I'll put that in the description down below. Yeah, and thank you, Squarespace, for making this podcast possible and for also making great websites easy to access, easy to make, and beautiful to look at. Go to squarespace.com/Chelsea and use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off. Thanks, Squarespace.
Bye.